Welcome to A Course in Miracles.
Welcome to A Course in Miracles. This is Christopher. Anyone who doesn't know Christopher, he is one of the directors of the Thetford Foundation, and at the moment, I know everybody knows me who's probably watching this, but the Thetford Foundation is something that Christopher was the director of from its beginning, and I thought today we could just sort of talk about that and get the story straight.
The
story. You were just saying before that it was 17 years ago to the day that you and your wife Adele and somebody else, Robert, had the vision to produce this sparkly book, that version of A Course in Miracles.
It was a most auspicious occasion, actually. We were out at Ayers Rock, Uluru, for a few days, and Adele said, let's just have one more trip out there early in the morning, which was the 12th of September, 17 years ago yesterday, 12th of September 2001. And we went out early in the morning and found a lovely rock pool right in against a cliff in the base of Uluru. And the three of us meditated for an hour for no particular reason or purpose. But at the end of that, I was surprised that we all had the same clear message, and that was just brilliant. And we returned to the hotel, and as we came to the door of our room, one of the hotel maids met us and said, "Oh, I've got some towels," and she opened the door for us, and she walked inside and said, "Oh, you haven't got the TV on." And she walked straight up and turned it on without saying another word, and there before our eyes were the Twin Towers falling down. And
9/11.
9/11. It was a momentous moment, to say the least. The thought that went through my mind was, the world's changed, and there was no dialogue. I had no idea. There was no information, but I just could tell it was a catastrophic thing. And the thought also went through my mind, you didn't have to, that didn't have to happen to persuade me that we had to print this book.
Yeah.
Regardless of the consequences, because I was well aware that we were most likely to be sued for breach of copyright.
And were sued.
And were sued.
Yeah.
Yes.
So a lot of people, I find, I'm on Facebook a fair bit and social media and various groups, a lot of them to do with A Course in Miracles, and they're reasonably interactive, but one of the things I find commonly is that people have a very limited understanding of the situation or the events surrounding, let's say, the court case, and the outcome of the court case especially, and why it was so important to have the sparkly edition without all the editing and everything else. So,
well, everyone will have a different view. At that time, no one on the internet or in a book could mention A Course in Miracles without being threatened for breach of copyright, which was claimed as owned solely by the Foundation for Inner Peace. And it was very, very restricting for anyone to spread a message about what they discovered or what their personal experience was. On top of that, there already were a series of 3 or 4, to my memory, copyright cases against various organisations that were already current in the United States but had not been finalised. When it came to light that the text of A Course in Miracles that had been published by the Foundation for Peace had been altered and was not the original text as edited by Bill Thetford from the original material taken down by Helen called the Ur text. I can now say in hindsight that we found out that was not the case, and I can now say that I know that absolutely to be true, because I have seen with my own eyes the original handwritten notes by Helen.
Yep.
And I've been able to compare those handwritten notes with the material edited by Bill Thetford, which was totally true to the original message. He just took out passages and references that were personal and considered unnecessary, but he didn't alter the message at all. Whereas the text that is still printed by a Foundation for Inner Peace is substantially altered. I mean, deletions of pages and pages of material in some cases, and some cases extraordinary changing in the wording used. And some will say that doesn't matter, and I won't argue with that. But the simple fact of the matter was, I personally saw it as simply a correction of the original message given to Helen and Bill. This is the message, get it out, and then don't worry about it. The next steps will be shown. So all I saw it was a correction, and I think many of us who were involved in that project at the time just saw that it was just a correction. And so we printed the book, 5,000 copies, and we sent them out around the world and gave them away. Subsequently, the copyright case in America was found not upheld as to be valid, and the case that was brought against me personally and others in Australia was settled. The terms of settlement were confidential and not really relevant to this tale, but we continued we printed the book again and gave more copies. And in that context, I set up a foundation just so that the Sparkly book, the Sparkly book could be printed out without any association with any idea of teaching or any group or any religious idea.
No particular head figure association.
No association of any individual at all, just to make the book available. And individuals can form their own conclusion.
That's something I find quite regularly, especially amongst the online course community, wherein there are people who've been doing the course, whatever that means, for 30 years, and they tend to favour one particular school of expression through a certain teacher or something, which to me seems to be the opposite of what the course is offering. You know, that you find your teacher within yourself. So I think when I read that unedited version and took on board the extra material, it was something for me anyway that did away completely with the need to associate with a teacher external to myself. And I remember having a clear moment in that where it was kind of scary, but I had to let go of the need to validate somebody else's version of what I think I ought to understand. Does that make sense?
It does, and it does, and I agree with what you say. Basically, one might go and listen to someone who is able to express and convey the essence of the material, but once the initial understanding is gained, I think it's really a personal journey, and it's also a matter of personal expression of the ideas, because repeating someone else's ideas or manner of expression is not. It's not what it is about. No, it's totally individual.
Yeah. So, now you've been in it since basically the very beginning, haven't you?
Well, interesting.
You're like one of the old guards.
Well, very. That's funny.
You've met Ken.
No, I've not met Ken.
Oh, you never met Ken?
I met Judy Scutch.
Judy Scutch.
Yes, and when she came to Australia in 1979. And in fact, my partner and I they were guests, like she and Bill Whitson were guests of ours for a weekend, and we enjoyed their company very much and exchanged confidences and stories. And that was a lovely time. And she was a very inspirational person.
How was the course? Like, it was just fairly new into the world back then. It was only been released for like 4 years or something commercially. How was the response? Like, because nowadays when I look at it online, people are like, "Oh, what's this?" But I believe that back in those days, there was a lot more fanfare and revelation with the coming to terms with it. And
I think the world was hungry for it. So there were many new age groups, as was the term used then, pockets all over especially on the east coast of Australia. And anyone like Judy Scratchcoming would be put on the circuit, and she would go from town to town, and some of the locals would put up posters and arrange a venue, and Judy would come, or others like her, whatever they were talking about, and the hall would be packed. Hundreds of people would turn up.
Hundreds of people
everywhere. Yes. And that was not just for A Course in Miracles; it was for any new spiritual.
Because she was involved in other stuff before the course, wasn't she?
She had been. Yes, she was involved with the Institute for Noetic Sciences with one of the astronauts. And that institute still functions today. And I remember Judy gave me a letterhead and it explained a bit about it, and I had no idea what she was talking about at the time. But now you can read about it online. It was the times were very exciting. A lot of changes occurred. A lot of what we take for granted now has come into magazines and newspapers in many ways, which then was very novel.
I look back on those days. Not that I was involved in it back then, but looking back at it, it's like you guys were like pioneers. You cracked the shell of consciousness with this whole new modality called A Course in Miracles that no one had ever heard of, and it's since then filtered out through this kind of almost underground network. Where it's
really strange. Yes, but I mean, even the fact that I heard about through a friend the word Course in Miracles, and I was not oriented towards religion in any way, shape or form, but I had some experiences, and I heard this name, and I knew I wanted to read that book, but I wasn't ready, so a couple of months later I decided I was. The book wasn't available in Australia, but I went to where I had heard that you might be able to organise to get it. I ran into an old acquaintance, and he said, we exchanged pleasantries. I told him what I was on about. And he said, I ordered that book some months ago. He said, it took 2 months and just came. He said, I actually have a spare copy, so you can have it. And I had it immediately, and I thought that was extraordinary. And I just happened to, because of my legal background, I was just interested in the story of A Course in Miracles, and I read all the books written by the various main players in America about how it came and what they did and what occurred. And so when copyright became an issue, I was really surprised because, to my mind, from my legal background, I couldn't see that there was any valid claim for copyright at all.
No, it's a divine work.
Yes, but not only that, based on what the parties concerned had written about Helen's wishes, and obviously the author. So when the copyright issue became an issue in Australia, those that sued us picked the wrong person to sue because I was on top of the copyright issues from the very beginning, to their great surprise. So the case proceeded, and it didn't proceed well at all for the complainants. But fortunately, we didn't have to test that too far in court.
I remember seeing years ago, someone gave me a disc CD of the story of A Course in Miracles, and I think Helen had passed away. She was being voiced by someone else, and Bill Thetford was narrating a lot of the story, and I'm pretty sure it was in that it stated that the course was not to be copywritten. Was it in the original notes as well? Was it from Helen? Was it from Jesus to Helen, do you remember, or was it just in Helen's wishes?
I don't recall, I do now recall. There was mention in the special messages something about copyright, but I think that was, I don't know if that was to do with copyright. I think it might have been something else. I'd have to check the text for that.
I've got that disc somewhere. I might have to go back and have another look at it, but it's very old and crackly now.
Well, it's really strange, but I mean, I don't know how it occurred, but I just seem to have come across the right person at the right time, and I remember a gentleman was wanting to unearth the text, the original handwritten notes, which I thought were in shorthand.
Yeah.
And he assured me they were handwritten, but anyway, this particular gentleman beavered away, and somehow it came to light, and someone somewhere had it, and
that was the text.
Yes, the text, and it's now freely available.
Yeah.
Well, it was.
I think it still is. There's a free copy on the internet, and there's also free copies of the sparkly version online and different things like that. So, and numerous apps and aids and stuff. So, yeah. So, I just think having you to be able to just put that out there and have that, from the horse's mouth, so to speak. You were the one that got sued.
I was personally sued.
Personally sued.
I still got the court documents.
So I think it's just funny because I quite regularly come across people who have a completely different version of events, and they get quite agitated when I try to tell them something. But anyway,
it was what the original suing was just a mistake.
Yeah.
And I used to follow the American court case, and I really appreciated the American judge, who was of Jewish background by the sound of his name, and I thought, what better than a person of the Jewish faith to adjudicate? And all I could see every time something happened was a correction. And then when a case was brought against us in Australia, in the Federal Court of Australia, again we ended up before a judge with a very Jewish name.
Yeah. In Australia?
In Australia. Oh. And it was brought in Melbourne, and we were much closer to the Brisbane court, and we had the option of transferring the proceedings, but we decided, our group and our lawyers, that we so much liked the attitude of the judge before whom we first came, that we thought it was worthwhile going to the expense of going down to Melbourne to have him continue to hear it, because he, to our mind, he could see through what we could see through, but quite often a judge can't. And we just felt that the case would have the best and fairest hearing. Yeah. So
it did.
It did.
It's all meant to be, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
So it's just funny that it's had to take that very sort of roundabout route and gather in all the cast and crew, all the different characters to play the parts, to finally, be able to make the statement that this is the unedited, pure version of the thing. So
yes, and that's just it's just
because there wasn't that before. There was just you had to take somebody's word for it that this is the actual document.
Well, the strange thing is, so many people, myself included, would read the text and say it's really, really, really difficult. I just can't get my head around some parts of it.
Yeah.
And that's and of course, in one way, we're not supposed to get our heads around it, because it's not about learning as the world would know learning.
Yeah.
Because the wording in a text, to my understanding, is to address the egoic mind and to so confront it that it becomes undone.
Yeah.
And that was the purpose of the text, to undo the egoic way of thinking.
Yeah. And I guess that leads further on to the new white edition that the Thetford Foundation is now putting out, that I was shown to have a hand in, which has even less of the material that was put in by man. It seemed, like the Sparklies added back what was taken out, and the white edition's taken out what was put in.
Yeah, it's taken out the chapters and headings, hasn't it?
Chapters, the headings, the capitalisation, the subtext. I think there's no subtext numerics in the text or the Sparkly.
No, there's not.
There's not, no. But and the table of contents and everything.
No page numbers or no paragraph
numbers.
numbers.
No, nothing like that. No paragraph numbers. So when you read it, you can't associate with it in the way that you would a normal reference book, where you could make note of a chapter or a thing. You just.
It's strange you say that, because when the text first became manifested from somewhere and was circulated, I really related to the text as a text far more than I ever did with the text in the course
I did
printed.
too.
The funny thing was, whenever I wanted to find a passage that I'd read that I found was particularly striking, I could never find it again. And I think that was the beauty of it, because I could never use it to justify an idea or something I thought.
Yep.
It was just there for a moment and then it was gone. And if I needed it again, if I really needed it, it would be there. And if I didn't, it wouldn't be there. I'd come across something else.
I had a very similar experience with the text in that way. I would consistently open it, the Fear of Redemption. Well, actually, it wasn't the text; it was the Blue Book. The Fear of Redemption, again and again and again. Even though I hadn't marked the page or anything like that, I would just find that every time I would just open it at random and be that page again, the same bit, and that actually led me into a very confronting moment, which brought about a moment of great change in my way of thinking of it. So, but it's just funny how that happens, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. So I mean, I like the which I kind of give me a copy of the you call it the white book.
The white edition.
The white edition.
Yeah.
And so it's just a book to open. And where the pages open, there's always something quite magical.
Yeah, he's perfect.
Which is quite obviously what I needed at that moment.
Yeah. Well, I think we're up to date. Anything else you think of? I can't think of anything. So I think it's just quite auspicious that you're here, 17 years to the day. And we're making this. I'm sure Adele is having a hand in this. I can feel her somewhere around. I'm sure.
Yeah, it was her idea that we go out to the rock that day.
Yeah.
But I mean, well.
Yeah.
No, I should to be correct. She received guidance that was what we were to do.
Yeah.
And boy, oh boy, did we, the three of us, get a box around the ears when we sat together. I mean, the energy at Uluru, I must say, they call it the dead heart, but to my mind it's a sleeping heart. It's just the energy of the rock is just so extraordinary. I can't describe it.
Yeah.
But, what a place to...
Yeah. I'm glad you went. I'm glad you went, or we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation.
Well, thank you, Robert, because he was the one who took us out.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, everyone.